being like a non-white foreigner in Japan is like a different experience, I think. And it's not like I ever got like discrimination. I didn't get discrimination. I just get a lot of ignorance. And it didn't bug me that much. In fact, it was quite funny.
Hey, what's up, guys? Welcome back to the Korekara podcast. In this episode, we talked to Sanaa, who's actually one of Miss Hanake's friends. So she's from the UK and is currently in Oxford studying Arabic and German. So we talk about how she taught herself Japanese from the age of 13, as well as her interest in Harajuku fashion, alongside working abroad in a Japanese tech startup and what it was like living there as a foreigner in Japan. So if you guys like the podcast, please consider subscribing and leaving a comment to let us know what you guys think. If you want to support us, check out our Patreon. We got a lot of bonus content and perks too. And by the way, if you haven't checked out our episode with Hannah, the link will be in the description. So hope you guys enjoy the podcast. Hey, what's up, guys? Welcome back to the Korekara podcast. My name is Raza, and I'm joined by my co-host Eric. We talk to people of all backgrounds and talk about lives in Japan, studying Japanese, or even tips and tricks on how to learn the language. This week, we're joined by a very special guest in Sanaa, who's actually friends with our friend of the show, Hannah. So it's going to be an exciting one, guys.
Yeah, like Raza said, we actually got to know Sanaa from a recommendation from Hannah. After we talked to her on the podcast, she recommended that we talk to her. And then the sort of small bio that she gave us was that she's a Pakistani-British Oxford student who's currently in her final year studying Arabic and German. And she apparently taught herself German well enough to get into Oxford and has also taught herself Japanese to an extremely high level. And along with that, not only studying Japanese, she also spent a summer working in Tokyo in a tech company that makes augmented reality puzzle games. And she was helping to localize and translate them and also playtest them for those puzzles. And beyond that, she was also really interested in Harajuku fashion. And that included being photographed by Tokyo Fashion, which is a very famous Instagram page, and featured because she has a really unique style that combines traditional Pakistani fashion with a cool Harajuku look. But today we want to hear all about her entire story with Japanese and her journey in going there. So, Sanaa, can you give us a quick background of who you are and where you're at today?
Hi, I'm Sanaa. I'm a fourth year German and Arabic student here in Oxford. You gave a really good intro. I'm really surprised at how much you got. But yeah, I've been learning Japanese. I think actively studying. I studied from like age 13 to 17. And then since then, it's just kind of, Japan's always in the background in my life, so I've always just had it, but I've not actively studied it. So yeah, it's been almost, that's like what, 8 years with Japanese now? Wow. But my whole love affair with Japan goes like way, way, way before then. And I'm not actually sure exactly when it started. I remember going through like some old stuff in like my house, and there I found a letter that I wrote to my mum, aged 4. So this is in 2004, and it was just like, "Dear Mum, I really want to go to Tokyo." I couldn't write Tokyo then, so I wrote Tokyo. So yeah, my mum doesn't know when it started. I don't know, but it's always kind of been in the background. So yeah, my relationship with Japan's a kind of lifetime thing.
I see. So it kind of just like, it just happened as one day, like from then you're just interested in Japan.
Yeah, it's literally anything. I remember there's like this show that used to come on called Timothy Goes to School. And in one of the characters is like a Japanese cat. And she was my favorite because she ate sushi. And I was like, oh my God, that's Japanese. I'm interested. You know, it was really like just that at the beginning.
That's really interesting because a lot of times like our guests go and talk about maybe it was like anime that got them into it, or consuming like Japanese media, or maybe like the language itself got them into it. But it's really interesting hearing that it kind of just happened. Like
yeah, honestly, all of that other stuff like came later. I didn't find about anime and manga. I didn't start watching and reading them till I was like 12. When I was younger, I used to catch snippets of Pretty Cure. It used to come on TV and like Sailor Moon, but I didn't know it was like anime or Japanese. It was all dubbed, so I just thought it was cartoons, right? So that really came later. I actually think my other stronger interests in Japan, which are like music and fashion, are what led me to anime and manga rather than the other way around. Yeah, I think it is kind of rare.
I see. So I guess going towards that, then how did you really get into like the whole fashion sense? So was it more of you were really interested in fashion and then that kind of branched to like Japan specifically, or was it kind of like the other way around?
Other way around. So basically, I actually remember it really well. I was like 10 years old, and I was bored on YouTube, and I just searched like cool Japanese songs because I was interested in Japan. I just wanted to know. And I remember clearly there were two artists that came up. One of them, her name is Tommy Heavenly Six, and the other was a visual K band called Alice 9. And so Alice 9, a visual K band. So I heard this song Tsubasa for the first time. It always has like a really close place to my heart because that's like actually the first Japanese song I listened to. I know this is like back in 2009. It had just come out, and because of that, I was like, I googled Alice 9, and then I found out about other bands like The Gazette and Nightmare and all the other visual Kei bands, and then I found out about visual Kei as a sort of movement, so not only musically but also fashion, and then that kind of led me to Harajuku fashion, like kind of more the punk and gothic style, like gothic Lolita or classical Lolita or like the really punky grungy stuff. And then on the other hand, Tommy Heavenly is kind of, you know how like Kyari Pamu Pamu is like, I don't know, Queen of Kawaii, like she's the one who made it really worldwide,
Right.
like all these really kind of kimo kawaii, like gross, cute aesthetic. I think Tommy Heavenly was also doing that stuff, but this is like, her songs came out in like 2003, 2005, like that period. And so through her, I also just got introduced to like again, things like more like kawaii culture and this like idea of it. So yeah, and her song Paper Moon, which is the first one I heard, is actually the second opening for the anime Soul Eater, which is how I got into anime, like through that. So it's those two songs. It's so specific. I went really in detail, but it's really like it's just like links, like on the internet. You click another link, and it just leads you somewhere. Like that's what my journey to Japanese was.
I see. Wow. And so around what time do you actually start getting into Japanese? Because you mentioned earlier that you got into it at age 13, but was it like after you kind of went down this rabbit hole of fashion, music, and I guess eventually getting to like anime and everything?
Yeah, so I remember after getting into more of the music, I used to learn the lyrics, and that's actually how I like used to practice pronunciation, is just like sing songs. And I think, so after I wanted to actually understand the lyrics, so I challenged myself to learn Japanese, but you know what, I was only like 11. It's really difficult to do something like that at 11, so I think I gave up really quickly. Like I learned hiragana and then that's it. And I just, enjoyed the music. And I remember like really clearly, it was just in the back of my mind. I remember my 13th birthday, I remember like thinking like, okay, this is the year you're going to learn Japanese, like you're actually going to do it. And I think it was because of the influence. When I was 11, that's when Hana started releasing videos.
Right.
Oh, yeah.
And also, yeah, and also there was another YouTuber called Grace, who also was like another British 13-year-old teaching herself Japanese. So I remember like I felt like I couldn't do it, and then I would watch their two videos and I'd be like, oh my god, they can already make a whole video in Japanese. I should be able to do that too. Like it was like a competition thing, but only I knew about it. And I was just, so that's why I was like, okay, 13, if they can do it, I'm going to do it as well. And that's when I started like properly learning Japanese.
So did you ever upload a video of you speaking Japanese?
I did, but I deleted it really quickly because I felt really shy. I was thinking of also being one of those YouTubers, but I was way too shy. I'm sure there's stuff out there still, but like it's really, it was so basic. Like, I don't know. I feel like this is probably how Hannah feels when she thinks about her first video. It's so like, there's lots of ums and ahs, and you don't really know the vocab, and you say the wrong word pausing every now and then to look up words. Like it was like that. So yeah, I did attempt it at one point.
And I guess like what exactly was your starting point? So you mentioned like hiragana, but was it like looking online and seeing maybe like grammar guides or vocab lists?
Yeah, I remember, I think there's this app called like Human Japanese or something.
Uh-huh.
And it's just like a really basic intro. Like, I remember getting it on my dad's phone because I don't have a phone at the time. And it was like hiragana, katakana, numbers. Like, what are these in Japanese? And I started out with that. Like, I remember I had a free trial of like 2 weeks. So I was just using that. And then just constantly going over it. And then I started learning like bits and bits of vocab, usually just from watching like anime or like just YouTube. And then I made like some friends that same year. So I made like two pen pals who I'm still friends with. So 8 years going. But
Wow.
because I think my improvement in Japanese came mostly because of my desire to communicate with them. Like I hate drills. I hate grammar drills. I don't like vocab drills. I really don't like learning language from a textbook. So I don't think I've ever used a Japanese textbook. I think I've looked at them online. Like you see like previews, but they just look so boring. So,
I've actually seen that
that's
that app
kind of
they
the
use.
process.
Like I used that one as well when I first started. I just remember.
Really?
Yeah, actually, like one of the previous guests that we had on, his name is Jack. He was studying Japanese like before me, and he recommended me that app like for me to start learning
really?
Japanese. And I really liked it because it was like a actually just a human way of explaining how Japanese works. And there's like a similar one called like Take Him out there online that I'm sure people listening know about. But did you encounter any like difficulties when you were studying Japanese with the method that you were using?
Difficulties. I remember I put off learning kanji so much just because it looks so scary, right? Like I remember reading like, oh my God, there's 2,000 kanji that people use in a regular, like every day. It was so scary. So I used to just, because I wasn't learning for anything. Like at that point, I wasn't learning for the tests or JLPT or anything. I was just learning for fun. So I could choose what I wanted to do, and I chose to ignore kanji for a really long time. Also, I think I always found it difficult to understand kind of how counters work, and I still struggle with that. Counters, I don't get what they mean. I just use hitotsu, hitotsu for everything. I remember seeing that like at that age, and I remember being like, what the hell, and just closing the page and saying, okay, I'm gonna ignore that. So I think my main issue was because I didn't have like a super clear direction. Like I wasn't even aiming for fluency, whatever. I just wanted to talk to my friends. So because of that, I think it led to me just ignoring stuff. It would have been easier to learn sooner. But yeah, I think with kanji that changed when after I started doing the JLPT tests.
I see. And like what exactly was kind of like the timeline with you learning Japanese in terms of I guess like the milestones? Like at what point, I guess, or at like what age did you feel like you were like comfortable speaking maybe, and then kind of when did kind of kanji come along the way in terms of like genuinely studying for JLPT?
Yeah. So I think my kanji interest began for my 14th birthday, I asked my parents to buy me a JLPT N5 exam. And I don't know why. I kept it secret from my parents. I don't know why. I think I was just like embarrassed or shy. And so I remember just asking them, they'd be like, what? Wait, you're learning Japanese and you want an exam for your birthday? Because it was quite like expensive to me then. And I remember because I thought like, I'm learning this for fun. I might as well get a qualification out of it. Like I was very like forward thinking. So after my parents bought me the exam, I was like, okay, now I have to pass. And my another motivation was, so I don't live near London, like I live near Sheffield, which is about 3-4 hours away. So, and the only Japanese bookshops were in London at that time. I didn't know about online shopping or how that worked then either. And there's one shop called Japan Center where they sold all the Japanese magazines, like the fashion ones I loved, like Kera, which focuses like on Harajuku, Gothic Lolita Bible, Zipper and Pop Teen, like all of those magazines were sold there. So my motivation to learn kanji was so that I go to London, I do the test, I go to the Japan Center. My dad always used to buy me, well, both my parents actually, like as a treat when we get to London, always buy me a new issue of like the magazines, like in person. And my motivation would be being able to read the magazine. So that's why I ended up actually like liking kanji. I actually do like kanji, even though I've forgotten most of them now, but
I
I do
see.
like them.
When did the like other languages come in? Because Hannah said that you actually study Arabic and German.
Yeah. So Japan was my first like second language. I just want to answer like I started feeling comfortable speaking it around 15,
Mhm.
16. That's when I used to have regular weekly calls with like my pen pals. And then with the other languages, so basically in the UK at my school at the time, you had to take a language GCSE along with all the other main subjects. And my school only had two options, French and German. And I've actually been taught French since I was like 7 years old. I don't speak any French, so that shows you how much I like that. Um, I don't like French. So, and, there's only two options, so I chose German. And it wasn't really like I had a big passion for German, not like Japanese, but I just had a really great teacher. She used to like really always push, like give me music to listen to, videos to watch in German. So it made me think that when I left that place and I went on to sixth form or like high school, like just before uni, it made me think like, okay, German is one thing I definitely want to study at uni. And Arabic is just like even I wanted to go to Oxford. I was looking at the course list and I was like, German and French, nah. German and Spanish, no. I was like going through like doing my shopping. German and Arabic, yeah. I have like a mental list of languages I want to learn. And at that time, Arabic was like next. So I just thought, okay, two birds with one stone, dual degree, German and Arabic. So I would say Arabic is the only language I've really like learned only in a class setting, like since the start of it. Um, yeah.
That's probably the first time I heard, like you said, on a 14th birthday, getting a JLPT textbook. Yeah, I remember for me, I was like, hey, get me like a Nintendo DS or something. Get me some video games. That's really cool to hear. Really committed to the language learning. So, and I guess like you kind of mentioned how the whole language learning process for Japanese is kind of like on your own terms. But did you kind of
hmm
do you ever find like a specific strategy along the way that you kind of use to kind of like consistently learn what you wanted to learn?
Yeah, so I used to just look up like JLPT N5, N4 kanji lists and grammar lists,
Uh-huh.
and then I would on Anki you would find like user-made decks like on the shared decks for kanji. So I would literally just use Anki for kanji, which was great. And obviously like reading my magazines like Kara, oh my God, I loved Kara so much. And I used to like some people used to be a community on LiveJournal that used to scan in like some pages of Kara. So I used to just spend all my time on that and just looking at all the magazines and like the Visual K magazines too. There's a lot. And then for the grammar, I used to use this website. I mean, it's still a great website. I really recommend it, renshu.org. I really like how they explain the grammar. They also have like a kanji dictionary and a lot of other things. But at that time when I was using it, it was just grammar, and they didn't go like too deep into it, like trying to explain. It was just like, it would have like the ending, like that. Like if you're learning, like what does that mean? So it'd be like that is used to like kind of refer or say speaking of or things like that. It'd be really like clear. So that's what I liked. I didn't like too much unnecessarily like kind of academic style terms. I just wanted simplicity.
Mhm.
Also, Tai Kim's Guide to Grammar, like that was so helpful for me for figuring out conjugations, especially like the rareru ending. I really hate that. It took me so long to understand. And because it was my second language, I didn't understand concepts like passive or anything. Like I didn't know what they
Mhm.
were or what was the conditional. So I just had to like do a lot of Googling, and Tai Kim really helped explain what exactly is passive, because a lot of the other resources were made for people who were aware of that. Um, so yeah, that was my strategy, was just looking up lists, Anki, renshu.org, and then I would try to use the kanji, the not the kanji, the grammar that I learned. I made like myself like a little personalized textbook, like as in it's only stuff I wanted to know and I cared about. And I would just like add like 3 or 4 new grammar entries into that textbook a day with examples. And then in my conversations with my friends that week over line, I would try to use them. And I think that's just a good strategy for learning languages in general. Like putting it into use as soon as speaking are really, like, in my opinion, really natural ways to learn language. I was never good at rote learning.
Did you ever encounter a scenario where like you tried to use a grammar point you learned and like people said it was like unnatural, people don't use that? Because like I remember like when I took classes when I was in Japan, like I learned grammar points that when I like try to use them with my friends, they would be like, that's like only like a grandma would use that sort of like.
Oh really?
Thing. Yeah, like no nanote. I remember like this one specifically. It's like I've never heard
never
anyone say
that.
Is what someone told me.
I've never heard it.
Yeah.
I think no, not really. I think one thing that was really difficult with my friends is because they were also like my age. So we were both 13, 14, 15. So they weren't very good at correcting me. I think they were too shy or what. But it was really difficult to get them to correct me half the time. And 2, I think, like I said, because I just learned with the media that I interacted with, like I never did classes, I ended up learning just what is used. I have had like embarrassing mistakes though with Japanese. Actually, I'll tell you. I remember once, so I was really, as you can tell already, I was really eager about Japanese. Like I was just such an eager beaver. So I saw, like, there weren't any Japanese people where I lived, but if I ever like saw someone and I heard them speaking Japanese, I would try to go and start a conversation with them because I just like, I want to talk, I want to speak, this is a chance. And so I remember I was in London this was after my JLPT N5, so this is, I was 14. And I remember there was like a bus stop or a bench or something. And it's just like an area where there's just more Japanese people in London. And I heard this couple, I think, speaking Japanese. And there was an empty space and bench next to them. And I saw this, okay, this is an opportunity. I wanted to say, suwatte ii, like, can I sit next to you? I ended up saying sawatte ii. And I just got like a weird look, but they understood. But I remember thinking like, oh, something's off. And then I was so embarrassed when I got home because I Googled it. I was like, what is sawatte ii? Can I touch you? So it was, I made like dumb mistakes like that. And I think one thing I've heard is that when I went to Japan, I think I got told that I sound like a bit like a gyar. Like I speak very like slang-like, which I'm fine with, but I guess that's one thing. But I've never had like, oh, you're using this wrong. And I don't know if it's because, I think it's more because people are just kind of shy at pointing out your mistakes more than me being right all the time. That's definitely not it.
I guess speaking of going to Japan, that itself was a really big opportunity for you. So how exactly did that materialize, and how did you end up having that job in Japan for that summer?
So basically, like because I ended up not studying Japanese at uni, but I still wanted to go to Japan. I knew I wanted to work there or have some sort of experience there. Whenever there was like a job posted in the careers service, like whenever there's a job posted that was based in Japan, I would always look, regardless whether I'm qualified or not. I would just take a look at the company, and I would like, if there's something interesting, I'd like mentally write it away. So that's what happened. I saw this advertisement by this company called Pratia. It's really funny because they were actually looking for a PhD computer vision student, which I'm not. But I went on their website, and I remember thinking like, oh, what they're doing is really cool. I don't know much about augmented reality then. It's just such a cool new technology, and I've always been a bit of like a tech nerd as well. Like I love reading about like tech and AI, and so I asked the career service if they could put me in touch anyway. Just like, because I feel like you don't ask, you don't get, you know? So I just asked them to put me in touch, and they were really open-minded enough. Like they saw my CV, which was nothing great. Like at that point, all I had done was like a lot of volunteering, and I I used to like be a fan translator for Japanese. Like when I was 16, I used to translate like like K-pop idols when they went to Japan and did interviews. I used to translate and subtitle like their videos in Japanese because I couldn't speak Korean, but I was really into K-pop at that time.
Uh-huh.
So that's all I had on my CV. But yeah, they were really open-minded and they had a conversation with me. And I think what really stood out to me is their values, because a lot of companies just put kind of like random word salad, like we care about this was really specific. Anyway, couple of conversations later, they were like, yeah, okay, we'd love to have you on. And I was really surprised, but also super grateful. And this is 2019. That summer I was off to Japan for 8 weeks. So it's a really great, like, I didn't expect this. It wasn't really planned. It was only like confirmed like March time that same year. Um, but it was a really great way for me to, because before that I'd always thought that what I'm gonna do is after I graduate, I have enough money, I'll save up, and I'll go to Japan for 2 weeks and just do everything I wanted to do. But now I got opportunity to go for 8 weeks and actually experience like life there a bit more. So yeah, really grateful for that. It was a great time.
I see. And I guess like now moving towards maybe the working environment.
Yeah.
So we all know this whole sort of infamous vibe of the foreigners in the Japanese workplace. So I was wondering, like, did you face maybe any of the sort of stereotypical sort of Japanese workplace foreigner type of situations, or was it maybe different for you? And was there, I guess, did you need a working proficiency of Japanese, or was English okay?
Okay, well, I was really scared of those stereotypes about working for a Japanese company, but honestly, I think I lucked out with this company. It was so like different, I think, from the standard Japanese company. Like one is like a startup, and two, even though like all their products are at the moment focused in Japan and for Japanese people, they were quite an international like they had like quite a diverse employees. Like you had people from like Taiwan, you had a lot of Japanese people, but you also had people from, there was another guy from the UK. You also had like really big age ranges. Like you had people who were students at Todai, and then you had like people who had been working in the industry for like 10 years. So I think I really lucked out. Like the hours were so good. It was 12 to 5 every day. Like you just had to be in there, and then you could come in earlier or later depending on your work. They had like a Friday happy hours event where everyone like goes around and tells everyone what they did today, and everyone's like claps. Like it was a small team. I think they've like since hired a lot more people, but at that time it was only like maybe 25, 30 people in like 2 small offices in Tokyo. But yeah, they were really chill. It was like you could work from home if you wanted. They had like, it was so much more chill than I was expecting, and I think I was really lucky to go to like such an open-minded, non-hierarchical company. Like it's like from the start, I remember they organized that every week, one person who's like ahead of a project or ahead of a team would just like treat me to lunch, and we would just talk, like get to know each other, like not about work, just get to know each other. And that was so nice because it's just really, yeah, I made friends that way. Like that's what I felt like. I think I made friends with a lot of the people who work there. So yeah, I got to avoid the stereotype of like long working hours or being like discriminated against. They were really, I'm also Muslim, so like, they used to go out of their way to find halal friendly or vegetarian friendly places where I could eat, because that was a really big problem I had in Japan. I remember they threw me like a surprise leaving party, and they found like a halal yakiniku, because I always wanted to try yakiniku, but I couldn't find a halal place for it. So they like surprised me and took me to one. So they were always like really aware of that. And I remember even before I went to Japan, when I was still like just asking about, what's it like, they were like, yeah, if you need a space to pray, there's a corner here, or there's a part of the room here. So yeah, I'm grateful that I got to experience like such an open-minded company that was like willing to work around like my needs as well. Um,
Hmm.
yeah, that's why the internship was so much fun. I'm really glad I don't have to experience that company. I think I set my standards really high now though. I don't know how I'm gonna find another internship that was as fun, or like another company, you know?
I mean, hopefully, one connection leads to another, right?
Hopefully.
Yeah, but I mean, that sounds pretty amazing. Like, you really got that whole flat hierarchy, or no hierarchy, just very flat company and very open-minded to
Hmm.
you specifically too. And I guess when you were looking in kind of I guess when you were in the company itself, like what exactly were your responsibilities like in the company? Because you mentioned that when you were looking for the job, actually, it was like meant for a completely different type of student based on experience. So, kind of, how did you go about that?
Yeah, honestly, I'm really lucky. I think I just got in through enthusiasm. Enthusiasm gets you far, I think. So basically, they make a puzzle game, augmented reality puzzle game called Sarah and the Mysterious Hacker Club. They have two
Hmm.
games of that now, and I think they recently collaborated with Psychopass to make a Psychopass themed one. And the whole,
Oh
yeah, so
wow.
if you're a fan of Psychopass, check it out. And the whole thing is it's like you go to the offices, it's like a meeting area, you get given like a phone and kind of brief run through of the story. Basically, you've been recruited by Sarah, who's like a 16-year-old hacker. She's like really cute anime girl, you know, and you you get given like a phone, and on it are like hints which and puzzles that you have to solve to get to your next location, and it involves you running, well, not running, you're not meant to run, don't run, but like walking across Shibuya to like various points of interest, like small not so well known temples, um crossings other than the Shibuya crossing, shops that have been around a long time, you know, like vintage shops and things like that. So those are all highlighted on this map you get, and then yeah, so you solve the puzzle, and when you get there, you usually get given a hint of something you have to scan. So you use your phone to like scan an item in the real world, and then there'll be like another puzzle in like AR. And the whole thing is, so
Uh-huh.
basically there's a bomb threat in Shibuya, and you need to what's it, defuse the bombs. So that's what. So there's
Hmm.
like a time limit. I think you only get like an hour and a half to play the whole game. I never finished it in that time. My first few days was just playing the game. But yeah, really interesting puzzles. It really makes you look at your surroundings differently. I think it'd be good for people who are in Shibuya a lot, just because it just shows you newer and exciting places. And so within that, I was kind of doing a lot of different roles, because obviously it wasn't, I don't think it was really planned to have like another intern. um,
Uh-huh.
so I think one of my main roles was making the English version of Sarah and the Mysterious Hacker Club. So that involved not only like translating all the dialogue um, into English and making like a script for that, but at the same time, the puzzles really relied on like kanji knowledge, or like Japanese in general, or like Japanese cultural things. So I had to localize it into English. So that was really fun. I remember they bought me some puzzles. Like one day I was just at my desk and I was just playing puzzles, like puzzle games. Um, and
Oh wow.
they had like
Uh-huh.
books on puzzle theory, and they were just like, yeah, try to make these puzzles in English. And it was really fun because I had to figure out how to like make it so it didn't stray from the story, but at the same time, like it didn't stray from the story, and I could use the same like visual aids that would still be in the environment, but it had to work in English culturally as well as linguistically. And then it also had to sorry, I lost my train of thought. uh, yeah,
No
but like it had
worries.
to work with how the game worked. Like you got hints from Sarah. Like if you've been spending a couple more minutes, Sarah would be like, "Come on, hurry up! What's taking you? Here's a hint. Here's a clue." And there's also like a part of it's like an app that was meant to be a communication app for the Hacker Club, and there's like documents in
Hmm.
there as well that are meant to give you clues that you have to keep referring back to. So when you're done a puzzle, it's not like, okay, you're done, move on. It's like some part of that puzzle or some of the documents involved with it will play a role in another like 3 4 puzzles later. So you have to always keep it in mind.
Oh,
So
I
it's
see.
trying to make that was really difficult. Making the documents and the wording of things so that it worked for like multiple puzzles was really hard, but it was really cool. So yeah, I was basically making puzzles. I wrote in I have like my diary here of when I was in Japan, and I wrote like, oh, I'm a puzzle master. I get to make puzzles. That was my job description. But yeah, I also got to try other things. Like I got to try out like proposing like a new project, a new game for them to make. I also got to work with augmented reality more technically myself and making an Instagram filter for them. So yeah, because I didn't have such a clearly defined role, I got to just try everything, which is really fun.
Yeah, that sounds really amazing. You really got, I mean, personally, I'm a big fan of walking and going on adventure. That's a lot of what I did in
Yeah.
Japan. That sounds like you put a whole new spin on it. So that sounds really amazing. I mean, having to actually get that is really cool too. And I guess maybe going towards like the Japanese aspect of it. So in the workplace, were you mainly communicating in English or Japanese, and kind of how did that play a role in the workplace, and was it maybe difficult at times if that was the case?
It was mainly English because they really focus on the fact they're like an international company, and so they wanted to use
Hmm.
English as the main language. So even to each other, like even though I think my office is mostly Japanese people, they would try to speak English to each other, which you know what, I really like respect that because I would definitely just give up and speak like my own native language. But
Uh-huh.
yeah, I think what ended up being is that they didn't really know how much Japanese I could speak or if I could or not. So when we used to go out to dinner and stuff, and then it was kind of awkward to start speaking Japanese all of a sudden. But when I did, I think they were surprised because I just went with the whole English thing. I mean, I wasn't too fussed about speaking Japanese in the workplace or not, just because even though it's such a relaxed company, my Japanese, I can't really do keigo. I can't speak formally very well. I don't really know the social cues for that as well. So I'm actually
Hmm.
really grateful that they didn't have that because I would struggle with that a lot. Instead, it was more like, just talking normally in English. And then when I did speak Japanese, it would be like my usual like chatty way so that it was more like friends and not formal. So
Uh-huh.
yeah, thankfully it was kind of easy. It was really nice though to be able to hear like Japanese on an everyday basis and also to like finally be like "Otsukare-sama." Like you always hear that in TV shows, anime, like everything. I was like, "Oh my God, now I get to say that when I leave." These little things really made me excited.
Yeah, fully immersed in the culture right there.
Yeah. And the bowing. Oh.
Like, oh, this is my first bow. Oh, I got
Yeah,
it.
yeah.
Like,
Or like, when you were at convenies and stuff, like, you hear like the rote phrases they have. I don't remember them, but it's like a rote phrase they learn that you always hear, like, would you like a bag? Do you want chopsticks with that? Should I heat this up? I was just like, wow, I'm living in like a TV show.
yeah, and I mean, the whole idea of living in Japan, like, that's a whole different feat in itself, especially when you're coming from a completely different country. And you kind of mentioned the idea of, like, it's very, like, difficult to find, like, food accommodations in Japan because of, like, the culture. But were there maybe any other, I guess, cultural barriers or shocks that kind of hit you when you actually started living
Oh
there?
yeah, socializing for real. I thought I'm quite extrovert, so I thought it wouldn't be like, I'll just make friends somewhere because that's just kind of what I've done when on my year abroad when I lived in Jordan, and that's just kind of how what I did. So I expected the same to happen. But I remember like my first couple like 1 2 weeks in, I had already gone to like some music festivals in Shimokitazawa, and I'd just spent a bit of time in Harajuku. At that point, I didn't know that many people, and the people I did meet, even though I was quite open and tried to start a conversation with them, I always felt like maybe I'm coming on too strong or maybe it's not usual. Like I'm very much of like, yeah, hi, let's meet. Oh, I like talking to you. Let's meet up next week for a coffee. And I don't know if that's like a normal. I got told later that's not a normal thing like in Japan. So I must have like scared people off. But I remember just finding it really like people asked me for my line. We'd talk online for a bit and then never ever again. And I'm just like, let's meet up, let's talk. And it's just like, oh, I don't know, like, there seems like a bit of reluctance. So I found that this is like a weird culture shock. I found that it was a lot easier for me to make friends with Japanese people who already had some connection to like outside Japan, like they had studied there or they want to work there, or their significant other wasn't Japanese, or like counterculture, like Japanese people, like kind of more punks and things like that, who already were like against the grain. But when it came to just like normal Japanese people I always felt there was some sort of reluctance, and I didn't know if it was because I'm a foreigner or if it's because of my personality. I don't know. That bummed me out for a bit.
And I guess for the friends that you did make, you mentioned a lot of counterculture, punk, and kind of people, I guess, not kind of outside the average mold for Japanese. Did you have like, I guess, a specific place that you kind of went to like find these people? I know like it's kind of difficult, like you're saying, socializing in Japan, especially when you're kind of just by yourself there, like maybe you're not studying abroad. When you're studying abroad, you get all these like connections with students and whatnot. But when you're just kind of like thrown in there.
Yeah, so I still very much love Japanese music. It's changed now. I don't listen to visual kei. I mostly listen to indie and like post rock and things like that. And I already knew that the
Mhm.
place for all my favorite bands was Shimokitazawa. I spent so much time in Shimokitazawa. I used to go to like 2, 3 concerts like a week because the bands I liked weren't that famous. So their concerts would be like something dumb like 600 yen, like really not that expensive. Yeah,
Oh
you just pay
wow.
for a drink and you go. And in Shimokitazawa, there's so many like live houses, and they're always having festivals. Like there was like this one festival called New Link that I went to, where it was like um they all the like venues collaborate together and they hosted like 20 different bands in one day, and it's just you had to go in between, like you just were one band and you got access to all of them. And it wasn't that expensive. It was like 3,000 yen. So you know, they were so much more accessible. And when you start going to the same band's concerts, like you just other fans go regularly too, so you end up recognizing people. And I think it was when I really like this band called No Buses. They're like a indie band in Japan, but they sing in English. It's really interesting. They take inspiration from
Mhm.
Arctic Monkeys, which is actually from near where I live in Sheffield. So I felt like a weird connection to them. And
Uh-huh.
I think it was like the third concert of theirs. It was like that other people who went to them started recognizing me, and I started talking to them. Like I mean, I generally started conversations everywhere just because I was a really eager beaver and I really wanted to make friends. But it was a lot more reciprocal at like these concerts. And through them, you just met like a lot of other different types of music. So it's everything from more like soft pop punk to like actual screamo and mosh pits, and it's just like I don't know. It's like a different experience. Like you have something in common with them already. They already like that. They like that vibe. So when I don't smoke, but I would just like chill out in the smoking area because that's where everyone would just like be quiet and talk about the band they just heard. And I think I made most of my friends there or in Harajuku. So, yeah.
Wow. And I guess even transitioning to Harajuku then. So we mentioned a lot before about kind of how fashion actually got you into Japanese and really going into Japan all the way, I guess, throughout this journey. So when you actually got the opportunity to actually visit Harajuku in person, how was that? And do you really like go full on like on
I
fashion?
won't lie, when I first went to Harajuku, I was so excited, but I was also kind of underwhelmed just because it's such a tourist spot. There were so many people, and there's
Oh
just
yeah.
so much like tourist stuff, like really like cheesy and kind of, in my opinion, like quite tacky stuff, like that really showed. Because I think since I got into it in the last 8 years, kawaii has become like such a cultural export of Japan. Like just like anime and manga, like kawaii
Mhm.
culture and lolita fashion is how, this interest in Japan is spread. So because of that, it was really focused on that sort of tourism. Whereas I personally wasn't really interested in kawaii culture specifically or Lolita. Like I still just generally liked fashion, and it was more of a nostalgia thing for me. Like my own personal taste in fashion has changed a lot. So when I actually walked down Harajuku, I felt a little bit sad that I saw like the shops that I've heard of or I'd seen on like Instagram or in even in Kera. And I mean, Kera has died a couple of years ago in 2017, I think. So I did a lot of my other like fruits died. So I did like a lot of my favorite brands are just gone. So because of that, there were all these brands I didn't know. And then what they did sell was stuff that maybe 13-year-old me would have liked, but I now, being like 20, like I was 20 then, wouldn't have liked. I just, I couldn't help but feel a bit underwhelmed. I was just a bit sad. I was like, oh no. But at the same time, like one thing that stayed like constant is street snaps. And I used to love Kera because they would have the street snap section and you'd always see like the same models there again and again. It'd be exciting to see what they're wearing like this month, you know? And I think Tokyo Fashion started doing their street snaps around that time as well. Like I'm talking 2012, 2011. And it was through Tokyo Fashion that I learned a lot about kind of the different. I mean, I don't think you can do this with Harajuku anymore. Like, but at that time, there's like style tribes. Like, you would have one group that's very clearly like they like fairy K. One group is very like mori girl, like dressing in lots of like woolen material and lots of layering. There's people who are very clearly visual K. These guys are gothic. Like, he could put people in categories like that. I don't think you can do that anymore. But I learned about these like categories and all the brands and what was kind of popular through Tokyo Fashion and their website. And you know, they used to do a lot with like I remember in 2013 the it girls of like Harajuku were these two girls called Hikari and Julia, I think. And they just started like a lot of trends like tattoo tights and a lot of things that eventually was also popular in the UK. So I used to think that was so cool as like trendsetters. So I've always wanted to. Meeting Tokyo Fashion was a big goal of mine, but I just, you know, I didn't really find them like for a good while. I think it was like my third or second week. I actually met with one of my pen pals in person for the first time in our lives. Obviously, I had to. Yeah.
Wow.
So I met her and we had like a great day and like I took pirikura for the first time, which I'd always wanted to do. It was so much fun. And on that day, I actually, on the street, I saw a Harajuku personality. His name is Junyan. He's very known for the kind of really cute decora style. And he's been around. He used to be in Kera all the time. So me being me, I obviously had to go talk to him. And I was like, oh my God, it's Junyan. I'm such a fan. And he also runs the Harajuku Fashion Walk. So this is a walk that happens monthly where people just dress up and walk around Harajuku. And it's actually, I think, more foreigners than Japanese people now. But I think at the start it was very like for the community itself. So I joined the Harajuku Fashion Walk. I have it here, 28th July. And on that I met people who went to Bunka Fashion College, which is, you know, like one of the major fashion colleges in Tokyo. So I met some students from there and I had seen them on Tokyo Fashion. So they like took me to the spot where Tokyo Fashion is, and I would bump into them all the time in Harajuku. So it's quite like nice. I got pirikura with them as well. And like I bumped into Tokyo Fashion. I got their like I've got their like card here.
Oh wow.
Yeah,
so
I know.
cool.
And I was just like chilling with them. I was telling them like, you know, how long I've been a fan. I got street snap that day as well. And after that, I found out like, you know, what times they're there. And every weekend I would just kind of chill there because most people come, get street snapped and go. But I used to just sit there. Whenever new people would come, I would like talk to them like while they're waiting to get photographed, and also just chat with the photographers as well. And through that, I actually made quite a few friends too. Like I became friends with this girl, Purin. Her name is her nickname is Purin-chan, and she's like she used to be an idol, and now she's like a decora, like just a decora girl, and that was really cool because I feel like I've always idealized it in my head. So actually like seeing real people and how they dress up and having really interesting conversations with them was great. Like that was a great experience. So even though it was really different than how my 13-year-old self imagined it, and that did like make me a bit sad at first, I think it's a lot better this way, like way more real, right?
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, I mean, meeting your kind of
Oh
childhood
my
like
God.
celebrities
I
right
met,
in
you know the
person.
YouTuber Rinendo? Rinendo. So she's like, yeah, she's
Oh,
like a Lolita personality. She's been in Harajuku like in the scene since she was like 16. I have followed her like just what she's doing on the internet since like 2010. Like I remember like, trying to exploring how did she get into it because she was the only one I could go off. She was the only like foreigner, like she's American, who was really like in the Harajuku scene at that time. I mean, now there's so many, but at that time, I remember I would look to her and be like, "Oh my God, how did she do it? How did it work?" So I got to meet her in person, and I got a photo with her, and that was like blew my mind. And obviously meeting Junyan and just everyone, it just made me feel like, "Oh my God, this is kind of like crazy." Like I couldn't believe it was happening. But yeah, really glad it
it's
happened.
insane. And I guess like yeah, that's what like dream status right
Yeah.
there. It just kind of hits you. You're like, wow, and you actually got to meet all of them. And I guess did like that kind of have an impact on, I guess, like because you mentioned that your kind of your own fashion style has kind of changed over time from what you kind of had in your childhood and what you kind of looked up to. So like I guess now is there like a lot of influence from that, especially after you had the experience to go and live in
I
Japan?
think so when I was younger, because everything was so much clearer in categories, I just aspired to be part of
Hmm.
a category by buying the right stuff. I think it became less about your own personality and more about your category. So if you're a decor girl, make sure you wear this, this, this. And I think a lot of people still think about it in that way. But I think more and more now, and that's what you can see from Harajuku fashion. Like I saw a lot of articles at one point, I think 2016 or something, being like Harajuku fashion is dead, and it's because these groups don't exist. But in my opinion, I don't necessarily think it's dead. It's just that people are being a lot more individualistic again. And some groups are still there. Like I always saw Lolitas there. I always saw Decras, and they're still there. And I always saw like gothic punk as well. So I think it's just a
Hmm.
bit like, this time period is a transition for everyone. I also think it's like a period of transition for Harajuku fashion to being less about these style tribes, because I think that's what really differentiated it, like compared to the other fashion cities like London, Paris, is that you had these kind of clear groups and, Harajuku kids, like they grew up in Harajuku. And what I found out from Tokyo Fashion is that there's always like an influx of Harajuku kids, and then there's a point when they get too old and they stop showing up. So in that period, it's like everyone's style is changing so much, and now it's less, oh, I need to fit this role, and um, more I want to express myself. And you find that through like some really crazy fits. Like there's this one guy on Tokyo Fashion, Kanji. His stuff is wild. He wore like this massive thing and had like baby dolls and mannequin heads like embedded into it. It's actually a piece of art. Like,
Oh wow.
you know, I think you see a lot more wild stuff, but you also see a lot more things that you could see in the Western world as normal. Because I think what used to be the draw Harajuku is, oh my God, look, they're dressed up like Victorian ladies, kind of. How strange. It's not as strange anymore. Like, I don't
Hmm.
think what people in Harajuku wear is like, oh, I wouldn't look at it and be like, oh my God, that's so strange. But what I did like in Harajuku was the kind of this emphasis now. It kind of feel like of showing yourself or being true to yourself rather than fitting these, because that's how these groups originally started. And then they just became the names and the labels. And now it's going beyond the labels again, where people are just grabbing whatever. And I think because as I was growing up, it was really around 16, 17, I started exploring like my own heritage. I used to just, I didn't, I
Hmm.
grew up in like a really Pakistani household, like really, like traditional. And it's not like I ever
Yeah.
hated it, but I just used to never like quite understand the benefit of that. And it was really on 16, 17 that I started to really taking interest in like more Pakistani things, like Pakistani clothing, henna. I do lots of henna drawing now, and other aspects of my culture, and really being proud of it. And I think when you combine that with what that shift in Harajuku to these more like individual style, it just made sense to me to to when I walk on the streets of Harajuku, I want to express my own style, which is usually like really traditional Pakistani, maybe with like the color palette of something like something more kawaii, like a fairy K or something like that, but done in a
Mhm.
Pakistani vibe. And I think I like it because it really reflects me and my interests. I like it because I think there's not that much, people don't think there's that much crossover. And I also just wanted to advertise, like, look how Pakistani fashion, like, look how great Pakistani fashion is. Appreciate that too. So, yeah, I think kind of the even though I was really sad with like the my favorite brands closing down, Kera and Fruits being gone, I think that really like was the end of an era of like Harajuku fashion, and I'm grateful for it now because I think it's a lot more freer, and I don't think Harajuku fashion will ever die. It's become a lot more commercialized, sure, but I don't think it's gonna like die like
Mhm.
people said.
Yeah, I mean, it looks like if anything, it's becoming way more individualistic, like you were saying, and people really kind of testing new
Yeah.
bounds now.
That's what's exciting about it. I really liked how open and free thinking the people were that I met. Like they just did so many things. I met this one girl, she worked at Harajuku, so like she was shop staff, a very stylish job. And she spoke like German
Uh-huh.
and English, and she was like teaching herself German. So that was the first conversation I ever had that was in like three languages. And she worked like as well
Oh, wow.
as working in La Forêt, she worked as a body artist, which meant she would go to live events and in the background to music or DJ, she would like paint on people's like naked bodies, like really psychedelic piece of artwork. And it's just like, wow, how do you even start that? Like, how does that even become what you do? I just really liked how everyone seemed to have this sort of unique path that all brought them to the crossroads where Tokyo fashion takes their photos. Yeah, it was really interesting for me.
Yeah, I mean, that sounds really interesting because I mean, personally, I never got the whole Tokyo fashion experience. So just hearing about all the complexities and kind of like going from the style tribes all the way now, you have all the individualistic and really pushing new browns and different types of styles of fashion is really interesting to hear. And I guess now looking towards your goals to the future and just as kind of you as a person, how is everything looking and does maybe Japan kind of factor into this?
So my plans for the future are still kind of vague. I think Pretty was really a catalyst for me exploring my interest in technology and design a lot more. I mean, I'm currently in the AI
Mhm.
Society here, and I do a lot of work with them. And I want to further work in like tech and design in the future. So once I graduate from here, maybe I'll pursue like a master's. So Pretty was really a catalyst for that. I think that was like the first like proper. It wasn't my first internship, but it was the first experience that made me think like, oh, this is something I want to do because it was so much fun. Um, as for Japan
Mhm.
in the future, so there's a lot of things I struggle with Japan other than what I spoke about. I think one of the main things was kind of cultural awareness and food. Like being a Muslim, being like a non-white foreigner in Japan is like a different experience, I think. I think there's at least some familiarity with like the UK or anything. And it's not like I ever got like discrimination. I didn't get discrimination, I just get a lot of ignorance. And it didn't bug me that much. In fact, it was quite funny. I remember once I went to a konbini and after I bought my food, she like clapped her hands, was like namaste, and I was like, wrong country, not the right one. And I think this is improving, but I just found it so difficult to just eat anything in Japan. And like everything has meat added. They don't understand like the concept of halal or the idea that I need food that isn't even cooked with other meat, you know? So like I'd be like, is there meat
Mhm.
in this? They'd be like, no.
Mhm.
And I'd be like, is there meat in the broth? And they'd say yes. And I'm just like, well, you know, or like there'll be alcohol in a lot of foods. So I was really all I could have was like kaiten sushi and soba, like when I was there, and I had to cook myself, and I couldn't really understand like Japanese ingredients. That was tough. So because of that, it felt that made me feel like living there was really difficult. And even though it was a childhood dream to go there. Being in Harajuku and all those places, it felt so much more. It felt really superficial because everyone, at least like a lot, not everyone, but I felt like a lot of people there are trying to be fashionable and trying to get famous, and there's nothing wrong with that as a goal, but I think it's just really different from my view of the world and what I want to do. Like I'm not aiming for fame or money or anything like that. I think those are all really like material stuff that can go at any moment. So I just felt the environment was in general like a bit more superficial, and I found it really difficult. I mean, I'm quite religious, so I was kind of relaying everything to my faith wise, and I found it really difficult to practice my faith as much as I was like, there's nowhere to pray. It's really hard to find halal food, and I really love Japan, but I found that difficult. Also, another thing is I'm really scared of earthquakes, so you can say Japan is not the best. Like I experienced some and I just couldn't sleep and things like that. So even though there weren't any major problems, these little niggles had me questioning whether or not in the future I want to have a life in Japan. And honestly, I don't know. I mean, if Prettier were hiring again, I would apply because and that company was so much fun. I want to do that again. But at the same, and all my favorite music is there. So being able to go to Shimokita like every week and see all the bands I liked is great. And I'm still in contact with like some of the bands I met, which is crazy, but I know it's like such a
Oh,
fan,
wow.
like such a everything, something a fan dreams of, right? Like,
Yeah.
but so I can definitely think like Japan's always going to play a part in my life, and I hope in the future I can, I want to live there. I want to try living there again for a longer period, like a year, 2 years. Whether I could live there full term or whether it's really clearly set in my goals, I'm not sure. Just because of like what I mentioned already, and also like it's just so
Mhm.
far from home, and I would really prefer to be a bit closer because keeping in touch with my family was really difficult when I was there. So I mean, you guys can relate to that. Your time gap was bigger.
Yeah, time zone was wild. But yeah, I mean, I think this is a good place to wrap up the podcast though.
Thank
So now
you.
thank you so much for coming on. It was a really amazing time talking to you. I had a great conversation. I
Really?
felt like I learned so much from this. Yeah, no, I
Yeah,
learned a
same.
lot. So,
Wait, I didn't know
oh
anything
my god.
about the
Oh.
Harajuku thing. Like I've seen YouTube videos like of Conan Conan going there, but I didn't really know any like specific stuff
I'm no
about
expert, but I
it.
just think, yeah, the YouTube videos really focus on the kind of the grabbing points of it, the stereotypes of Harajuku fashion. So hopefully, yeah, I'm glad I
Mm.
can help you a bit about what I mean, I was only there for 2 months, but what I think is more real Harajuku.
Yeah, I mean, I felt like I kind of like burst through the stereotypes there. Like, I feel like I know like just that much more about
Yeah.
it compared to before. So, I mean, it was really cool to hear. But yeah, I mean, it's really good having you here. We'll go link everyone to the Tokyo fashion
Ah.
street posts with Sana. You guys should check that out.
Oh, on that day I was actually really sad, like, cause it was Eid, which is like a religious festival, and I went to the
Mhm.
mosque in Japan for prayers, and then um, after the prayers, everyone kind of went to celebrate with their family, and there's not as much a Muslim community there. So, like in the UK, you have loads of like fun fairs, carnivals for Eid. There was nothing in Japan. Like I asked, there was nothing. And seeing everyone go back to their families, like all happy, ready to celebrate Eid, and I was just on my own. I had to like go home, and I remember I just like cried for a bit, and then
uh,
I was like, okay, let's do my makeup and go to Harajuku and feel better. So, even that photo is not like showing like a picture perfect experience of Japan. Like there were some downsides. But yeah.
yeah. But thank you so much for coming on. Really appreciate you coming here on to Korekara. I guess to finally close it off, we kind of do this little fun thing at the end where we have our guests give a message to the Korekara listeners. So, do you have a message, a fun little message for our Korekara
Yeah, I
squad?
would say, I mean, I know a lot of you are learning Japanese, so honestly, just try to talk to as many people as possible. You probably heard this advice before. And if you're in Tokyo, go to Shimokitazawa. It's such a cool place. Just go into a live house. I promise you, it won't cost you more than 2,000 yen most nights. Just go.
You guys heard it. guys, thanks for making it to the end of the podcast. Big thanks to Sanaa for coming on. We really enjoyed talking to her and appreciate the time she took out to go and talk to us. If you guys like the podcast, please let us know in the comments below. I also want to go give a shout out to our loyal patrons, Izenga71, Sad Boy, Boy No Eyebrow 4, KH90, Jack, and Miku. If you guys want to support the podcast too, please consider joining our Patreon. You can get early access to all our episodes alongside other exclusive content. We really want to go make the quality of our content better as we go along, such as improving our equipment or even adding a video portion to the podcast. So any contribution really goes a long way. So thank you guys for listening. See you on the next one. Peace.